Howdy folks, Doc here with Last Best Tool. And the other day I was talking to a mechanic friend of mine and I asked him what he thought the difference was between, say, a DIY tool and a professional grade tool. And it turns out he gave a tremendously good answer with one word after a little bit of thought. And that one word, no, it wasn't price, wasn't quality, wasn't durability, wasn't performance. His word was trust. And he said, do I trust the tool? And that could be trust to get the job done, trust that it fits right, trust that if it's, let's say, a torque wrench, that it's giving you, the accuracy that you need. And it didn't matter the brand, it didn't matter the warranty, anything else. It was, does he trust it? It was that simple. I mean, he said it in one word. I just took like 50 words to try to paraphrase his one word. But anyway, and I was watching some of my neighbor's YouTube videos. My neighbor Jeff, he runs the Den of Tools, and by neighbor it's Montana, so he's 300 miles away. But yeah, that's still neighbors around here. But I was kind of curious about what Icon is doing, because it sounds like they are really going after a few select pro markets. Now, I've seen a lot of Pittsburgh in mechanics toolboxes, professional mechanics I trust. And to them, it's like what gets the job done is kind of how they're looking at it if they trust the tool. Goes back to that word trust. So I started worrying a little bit earlier, thinking, gosh, I mean, you've got a mechanic working on my car using Pittsburgh tools. I mean, is that arrogant? Is that, being elitist or something? I'm just thinking, well, is it able to get, the quality of work done that I'm expecting? I mean, why isn't he using a Snap-on or a Mac or a, even an Icon, especially a G2? No, he's got a bunch of Pittsburgh stuff. Now, where that thought kind of originated was there's a lot of wisdom for new mechanics, new auto techs on YouTube, and some of it says go buy the cheap stuff. Go buy Pittsburgh. Get yourself going. Start working on stuff. You can stay off the Snap-on truck, and buy better when you have more money. Well, you're still that professional, still working on cars, and you're not using the stuff that you want. You're using the stuff you can afford. But that stuff is sometimes called DIY stuff. Now, Jeff over at Den of Tools talks about DIY things. He talks about what are called prosumer grade tools and prosumer other things. Prosumer used to be a big term in the digital photography world, where it was a camera that wasn't just a point and shoot, but then didn't have the full features of a DSLR. So, you could make some easy adjustments, might have had a few more dials and knobs and stuff. So it was considered a prosumer or a professional consumer grade. Well, I'm a professional homeowner, and you might know who really pushes that theme. But I started thinking, if the mechanics are using the cheap stuff for various reasons, but they should have the good stuff, or they're working towards the good stuff, or you don't need the good stuff. It seems like they're playing all sides, yet the DIYer is supposed to be relegated to the less expensive, almost disposable tools. I don't think that's the case. I mean, otherwise I'd see a lot more PB Swiss in auto shops, and I don't know if I've ever seen any. See it in other things, at the airport and stuff. But and then maybe it's, I've got Snap-on and gear wrench here, and both of these have interchangeable shafts. In fact, they're interoperable too. But maybe that's it, is that you've got a company that's big enough that it can make things that might not have as many sales, but they're very specific. Because both of these I'm running. 1/4-inch square drives on my ratcheting handles. There's not a lot of screwdrivers that are dedicated to that, so maybe that's it. But anyway, trust seemed to be a good answer, but then I also wonder if mechanics are playing both sides, saying you can have the cheap stuff, the tools don't make the mechanic, but then that's almost Snap-on's logo, better tools, better mechanics, or whatever. And then Icon going directly after Snap-on at a budget price. I mean, it might mean that spending less on a tool doesn't make it a DIY tool. It just means it's less expensive. But then what is really the difference? And is it something that fits with a DIY versus professional? Or is that just simply two different people? The DIYer tends not to ever get paid for the job, and the professional tends to need to get paid for the job. To me, that's That's the big difference. If you get paid to use your tools, then suddenly you're using professional tools because you're a professional. But simply going by brand or price or even durability or function, that may not make a DIY tool. I think there's a category actually, and here's the answer to it, that is below what we're thinking as DIY. I just as soon get rid of the DIY moniker, because otherwise if a mechanic is using a Pittsburgh, he's a DIYer. He has to be, because that's a DIY tool. But I think there's a lower one, and that is the disposable consumer tool, and that's something that really is not designed to last at all. And that might be, any electronic tool. There are so many corners cut that you might have maybe an hour of run time. If it's a drill, you have a combined 1 hour of running the drill before the bearings are shot, or the battery doesn't work, or the contacts come loose from the circuit board or whatever, because that's where they cut all the corners. I don't like those tools. I don't like it when I see those tools in use, especially if I've hired somebody to do some work. But if somebody walks in, say, to work on my furnace, and maybe they don't have Klein tools in their bag, does that mean I don't trust them? No, they might have inherited their father's tools when he was the HVAC tech, and he knows way more than almost anyone. So that old wood-handled no-name screwdriver, it still works because his professional knowledge is what's happening, rather than using a Snap-on tool or a Klein tool. Anyway, I'm curious what you think, because I've approached the DIY thing. I think I have a video called something like you say DIY like it's a bad thing. It's amazing what the average DIYer has done. It's like one of everything. We're lucky as DIYers if we get to do two of something. I mean, I would love to install a dishwasher. I've installed a few of them, but it's like I finally have that dialed in. But when there's a new thing, I've installed all kinds of stuff, water treatment things, water softeners, furnace ducts, done some drywall, some roofing, built all kinds of fences, the mechanic stuff for bicycles, for cars, for trucks, the basic stuff. But it's like, how many times do you get to do as a DIYer, like a wheel bearing? Twice. Brakes, you might get to do a little bit more. But some things, an air conditioning compressor, it's like maybe once in a lifetime. So, do you need really good tools for that? I think so. That's the point of this channel. But on the other hand, the people that do it over and over again, maybe this Pittsburgh ratchet does exactly what they need. And so why should they spend more? And maybe they've got a dozen of them, so they've got them all over the place versus one Snap-on. So maybe that's a pro-level tool. Maybe it has nothing to do with the grade of the tool. It's whose hand is it in. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. And with that, Doc out.